For centuries, the world was dominated by kings and empires, where the authority of rulers was absolute. The will of monarchs controlled the lives of everyday people, dictating their work, their beliefs, and their freedom. But something changed. An idea began to take shape that would transform not only political power, but the very foundation of society. That idea was classical liberalism. Classical liberalism isn't just another political theory, it's a worldview, a philosophy that challenges the concentration of power and places the individual at the center of social and political life. But what exactly is classical liberalism, and why does it matter today? At its heart, classical liberalism revolves around four core principles that have shaped modern society as we know it. These principles weren't born in a vacuum. They emerged as responses to the social, political, and economic challenges of their time. Let's dive deeper into these foundational ideas. The first pillar is individual liberty, the belief that each person has the right to live their life free from unnecessary interference. But why would classical liberalism place such emphasis on liberty? This idea emerged in reaction to authoritarian regimes and social hierarchies that denied individuals control over their own lives. In pre-Enlightenment societies, rulers and monarchs often dictated what you could believe, how you could live, and where you could go. People were subjects of the state or crown, not free citizens. Classical liberalism rejected this, arguing that personal freedom is a natural right, essential for human flourishing. The contrast is clear. While authoritarianism treats people as instruments of the state, classical liberalism holds that society thrives when individuals are free to pursue their own paths. In a time where rulers had unchecked control over citizens, liberty was a revolutionary idea. The first principle, individual liberty, is perhaps the most obvious, yet its implications in modern policy are profound. Classical liberalism argues that individuals should be free to live their lives without unnecessary government interference. But what does that mean in today's world of censorship? Take the issue of free speech, especially online. Let's see how classical liberalism would respond. Classical liberalism, grounded in the value of personal freedom, approaches current American issues like hate speech on social media differently than modern liberalism. While both share the term liberal, classical liberals tend to be more cautious about government intervention, advocating for minimal restrictions on speech even when addressing harmful content. This skepticism contrasts with the approach of modern liberals, who often support more regulation to mitigate hate speech and its societal impact. Classical liberals champion free speech as a fundamental right, essential for the exchange of ideas, personal development, and the functioning of a democratic society. From this perspective, even hate speech, unless it directly incites violence or harm, would be protected under the principle that the remedy for bad speech is more speech, not censorship. John Stuart Mill's On Liberty argues that silencing an opinion, even if it is considered wrong or harmful by the majority, deprives society of the opportunity to challenge, reconsider, or reaffirm its own beliefs. Some of you might say, okay, now I understand why classical liberals advocate freedom of speech. But how would they respond to hate speech? Well, let's take a look at it. While classical liberals might acknowledge that hate speech can cause harm, they would likely adhere to Mill's harm principle, which suggests that the only justification for interfering with the liberty of action of any individual is to prevent harm to others. However, defining what constitutes harm in the context of speech can be contentious. Classical liberals might argue that unless speech directly leads to physical harm or immediate danger, it should not be legislated against. Drawing from contemporary discussions, some classical liberals might advocate for what has been termed transformative liberalism, where civil society counters hate speech through education, promotion of counter-speech, or other non-legislative means. This approach seeks to transform societal views without infringing on free speech rights. Besides directly responding to hate speech, classical liberals would also argue for viewpoint neutrality in legislation, where the government does not favor one viewpoint over another. Legislation that bans or restricts hate speech could be seen as violating this principle if it selectively targets certain types of speech based on content or viewpoint, which could be considered an overreach of government power into the realm of personal expression. Given these points, classical liberals would generally oppose legislation that bans or restricts hate speech, because they would argue that such laws could easily be abused, leading to censorship of not just hate speech, but any speech deemed unpopular or controversial by those in power. Or, there's also concerns about the slippery slope where today's hate speech laws could expand into broader areas of speech in the future because of semantic shifts. Besides, they might also point out, as seen in various discussions on online platforms, that hate speech laws are often not enforced neutrally, tending to favor certain groups or ideologies, which contradicts the liberal principle of equality under the law and creates more evil. So, how would you think about these ideas of classical liberalism on freedom of speech? Please leave your comments below. The second pillar is limited government. Classical liberalism's call to restrict the power of the state arose directly from the experience of living under absolute monarchies and centralized power. In such systems, rulers had the authority to imprison, tax, or silence citizens at will. This unchecked power led to oppression and corruption. To classical liberals, the government's role should be limited, existing not to control, but to protect the rights of its people. A government that intervenes too much in the lives of individuals risks becoming oppressive. In contrast to other ideologies that favored powerful, centralized control, classical liberalism argues that power should be dispersed and constrained by laws. The more power a government has, the greater the risk of violating individual freedoms. To understand the full power of classical liberalism, we need to look at where these ideas came from and why they were so radical. In a world where kings ruled by divine right and the state controlled nearly every aspect of life, the idea that power should reside in the hands of the individual was dangerous. It challenged the very structure of society and government. Perhaps the most significant figure in this transformation was John Locke, often considered the father of classical liberalism. Locke lived through the English Civil War, a time of great political turmoil, and witnessed firsthand the consequences of absolute power. In his famous work, The Second Treatise of Government, Locke argued something profoundly simple yet revolutionary: that humans are born free and equal, with natural rights that no government or monarch could take away. Locke wrote that individuals have a right to life, liberty, and property, and that these rights are not gifts from rulers, but are inherent to human nature itself. Government exists only to protect these rights, and when it fails, the people have the right, no, the duty, to replace it. Locke's influence can be seen in the very fabric of modern democracies. His philosophy underpins the belief that government must derive its power from the consent of the governed, a concept that directly challenges authoritarian rule. But Locke's ideas were not just theoretical. They were deeply practical and laid the foundation for revolutions and movements that reshaped the political landscape. From the American Revolution to the French Revolution, classical liberalism became the rallying cry for those seeking to escape tyranny. However, classical liberalism wasn't just about politics. It also had a profound impact on economics. Locke's principle of property rights naturally extended to the marketplace, where individuals were seen as free agents, capable of creating wealth and contributing to society through trade and innovation. This leads us to the third key principle: free markets. The classical liberal vision of free markets was later expanded upon by thinkers like Adam Smith, who argued that when individuals pursue their own self-interest, they unintentionally contribute to the public good. This concept is often referred to as the invisible hand, the idea that economic freedom leads to prosperity and innovation. Free markets, according to classical liberalism, are not chaotic or unregulated spaces. They are structured by laws and agreements, but they remain places where individuals, not governments, decide what is produced, traded, and consumed. This freedom to exchange ideas, goods, and services is what powers economic growth and innovation. Finally, we come to the fourth pillar, the rule of law. Classical liberals understood that freedom requires order. Without a legal framework that treats everyone equally, society would descend into chaos. The rule of law means that everyone, from the highest official to the average citizen, is subject to the same laws. It protects individual rights and ensures justice is applied fairly, Without the rule of law, individual liberty would be impossible to guarantee. Classical liberalism emphasizes that laws must be just, transparent, and applied equally to all. This is not merely a tool for governance, but a foundation for human dignity and fairness. So, what is classical liberalism? It is a philosophy that places the individual at the center of political and social life. It believes in the power of people to govern themselves, in the freedom to make choices about their lives and their work, and in the rule of law to protect these freedoms. These ideas continue to resonate with us today because they speak to something universal: the desire for freedom, justice, and the pursuit of happiness. To truly grasp how classical liberalism evolved, we must go back much further than the Enlightenment. The roots of these ideas stretch back to ancient times, when philosophers first began questioning the nature of society and the individual's place within it. Classical liberalism, as we understand it today, evolved from a long history of thought and debate. In ancient Greece, philosophers like Aristotle explored the concept of natural law, an idea that certain truths about justice, rights, and morality were inherent to human nature. Aristotle believed that humans are naturally political beings, but that the purpose of politics is to cultivate virtue and the good life. Although Aristotle didn't fully develop the ideas of liberty that classical liberalism would later champion, his views on the individual's role in society laid early foundations. Meanwhile, in ancient Rome, thinkers like Cicero expanded upon the concept of natural law, arguing that true law was universal and unchanging, a higher standard than the whims of rulers. Cicero's belief that individuals had inherent dignity and rights set the stage for later discussions about freedom from arbitrary rule. Cicero famously said, "True law is right reason in agreement with nature. It is of universal application, unchanging and everlasting." These early reflections on law and justice would echo through the centuries, influencing thinkers in the Renaissance and Enlightenment who built upon these proto-liberal ideas. Fast forward to the Renaissance, and we find a period of cultural rebirth in Europe, where human reason and the study of classical texts were celebrated. This era marked a shift in focus, from the divine right of kings to the dignity and capability of the individual. Thinkers began to question whether humans were truly subject to rulers by divine right, or if, as Cicero and Aristotle suggested, there were universal principles of justice that applied to all. Locke's writings were influenced by the turbulent political climate of his time. He lived through the English Civil War and the Glorious Revolution, both of which questioned the absolute power of monarchs. Locke's second treatise of government put forward the radical idea that governments are not legitimate unless they protect the natural rights of their citizens, rights to life, liberty, and property. Locke's ideas didn't emerge in a vacuum. They were deeply shaped by the experiences of his time, the rise of constitutional monarchies, the breakdown of feudal systems, and the growing belief that individuals could and should govern themselves. Locke also drew upon the work of earlier thinkers like Hugo Grotius and Thomas Hobbes, who explored the concept of the social contract. Where Locke diverged from Hobbes, though, was in his optimism about human nature. While Hobbes believed that humans in their natural state were brutish and in need of a strong centralized power to maintain order, Locke took a more positive view. He believed that, in the state of nature, people are generally reasonable and capable of self-government. This optimism would become a key tenet of classical liberalism. Around the same time, another key figure, Montesquieu, was contributing to the evolution of classical liberalism. In his work, The Spirit of the Laws, Montesquieu introduced the idea of separating powers within government to prevent tyranny. He argued that powers should be divided among different branches, executive, legislative, and judicial, so that no single person or group could dominate. Montesquieu's influence on modern political systems is immense. His ideas helped shape the constitutions of many countries, including the United States, where the separation of powers is a foundational principle. The balance of power, according to Montesquieu, ensures that individual liberty is protected from the excesses of government. As the Enlightenment progressed, so too did the evolution of classical liberalism. The emphasis on reason, individual rights, and limited government continued to spread, not only through political theory, but also through economic thought. One of the most influential voices in this area was Adam Smith, whose work, the wealth of nations laid the foundation for modern economic liberalism. Smith's concept of the invisible hand is central to classical liberalism's view of free markets. He argued that individuals, when pursuing their own self-interest, unknowingly contribute to the public good. In a free market, competition and innovation thrive, leading to overall economic prosperity. Smith believed that government should play a minimal role in economic affairs, intervening only to protect property rights, enforce contracts, and maintain national defense. This emphasis on economic freedom reflected the broader classical liberal belief that individuals should be free to make their own choices, both politically and economically. Smith's ideas became foundational to the development of capitalist economies, where free enterprise and innovation could flourish without oppressive government control. As classical liberalism evolved through the Enlightenment, it laid the groundwork for the revolutions that would follow, revolutions not just of political systems, but of thought. In both the American Revolution and the French Revolution, classical liberalism provided the intellectual justification for overthrowing tyrannical governments and establishing societies based on the consent of the governed. In the United States, Locke's ideas about natural rights and government by consent were deeply influential in the drafting of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. The belief that all men are created equal, with unalienable rights, is a direct reflection of classical liberal thought. In France, the revolutionaries also drew upon classical liberal ideals. The slogan, "Liberty, Equality, Fraternity," echoed the Enlightenment's call for individual rights and freedom from oppression. Though the French Revolution ultimately descended into chaos, the ideas of classical liberalism continued to inspire movements across Europe and beyond. As the 19th century progressed, classical liberalism began to evolve further, responding to the challenges of industrialization and the rise of democratic states. Thinkers like John Stuart Mill expanded on earlier ideas, particularly concerning individual liberty and freedom of expression. Mill's work on liberty argued that society benefits from allowing individuals the freedom to think, speak, and act as they choose, as long as they do not harm others. Classical liberalism also began to influence movements for the abolition of slavery, women's rights, and workers' rights. As societies became more complex, the principles of individual liberty, free markets, and limited government were applied in new ways to address emerging social and economic issues. But while classical liberalism continued to evolve and adapt to the changing world, its core principles remained intact: the belief in the dignity of the individual, the need for government restraint, and the power of free markets to drive innovation and prosperity. From ancient philosophers to modern thinkers, the evolution of classical liberalism has been a journey of ideas that continue to shape the world we live in today. But why has classical liberalism endured? Why do these ideas, born in the turmoil of the 17th and 18th centuries, still matter today? The answer lies in the universality of its values. Classical liberalism addresses the fundamental needs of human beings, the need for freedom, for justice, and for self-determination. Today, classical liberalism remains relevant because the challenges it addresses are still with us. People around the world continue to fight for their basic rights, for the freedom to speak their minds, to choose their leaders, and to live their lives without interference. Whether in established democracies or emerging nations, the core principles of classical liberalism continue to guide these struggles. Moreover, classical liberalism speaks to the optimism inherent in human nature. It believes that humans are capable of governing themselves, of making rational decisions about their lives, and of creating systems that promote justice and equality. In this sense, it is more than just a political philosophy. It is a vision of humanity's potential, and that is why classical liberalism appeared among mankind. It is a response to the deepest needs and aspirations of human beings. It emerged because people wanted to be free, to be treated with dignity, and to have a voice in their own destinies. It continues to inspire because those desires are timeless. As we reflect on the evolution and significance of classical liberalism, we see that it is more than a set of ideas. It is a testament to the enduring quest for freedom and human dignity. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history and impact of classical liberalism. If you enjoyed this exploration, please like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth looks at the philosophies that shape our world.